Hi, I've got about half an hour to film a video now. I thought I'd get going. I'm actually about to start the sixth turn of the 1939 game here. That's June 1939. I've played 5 turns already and I did make some videos. I might put them up on YouTube, I'm not sure, because essentially what I found was that although I did nothing wrong in what you saw on camera, I was talking about other things to do with the game, other points of the game that hadn't come in yet. And I was making a lot of mistakes. I've played 5 turns now, so I've read more into the rule book, reminded myself of more stuff that I'd forgotten or stuff I'd never learnt in the first place. And so those videos would not be so helpful to you. I think it might be start getting to helpful for you to watch me do a turn about now. So let's do that. So the first thing we've done, I actually have just done it. The first part of the phase, first part of the turn in the preparation phase is place reinforcements. Now we had 3 coming to the Japanese city of Tokyo. They have to go in home country cities. And we had 2 into nationalist China, 1 here and 1 here. I'll tell you a little bit about what's happening. Basically, 1939 we start with limited war essentially in Japan. Japan in China, sorry. Japan occupies roughly this area and Manchuria. And then you have the communists in the north and the nationalists in the south. They're not actually fighting unless they decide and the Chinese player, even if you're playing sort of multiple players, the Chinese player is only 1 player, but the Chinese nationalists and communists cannot go adjacent to each other. If they do, there's a 50% chance they will fight. So you can choose to do that, but obviously that would only be an extreme necessity. There's an option where they can remove that, but it costs them, something, and we can get into that later. So the Japanese are here, but there's a salient of belonging to China here in the southeast. And so essentially my plan as the Japanese in this game was to cut off the units in the salient here. There's a resource and there's a factory. I should explain these things. These red things mark resources. They don't come with the game, they're mine from another game. These blue things mark factories. At the end of the turn you have production and your factories process resources. There's also down here yellow ones marking oil resources. Every 3 red resources, normal resources, make 1 point of supply. Every single oil resource make 1 point of supply. Every attack you do needs 1 point of supply. So obviously the Japanese want these resources of oil. But at the moment they're here in China, and they've successfully, within 5 months, managed to cut off this salient. They've got a factory and they have got this resource from China. Factories also and resources, when processed, both oil and normal, also make material and replacement points. Replacement points are essentially all the gear and the people that you need to make an army. So for example, infantry cost the number of replacement points according to their strength. The defense or attack, whichever is higher. So this infantry unit, trying to get the focus, it cost 3 replacement points. Now we also had some builds earlier, I believe. Anyway, somewhere I've got an engineer unit. Well, they have 0/0 attack and defense strength, but they cost 2 replacement points and 1 point of material to make. Then when you get into things like planes and boats, obviously they cost more material and sometimes supply to make as well as replacement points. Now I've been moving factories around, so I think I might have lost some markers. I'll put that there and get that back. Another point. Okay, so yes. Then so Japan has moved down here and they've captured those points. That resulted in every turn you have to roll for Japanese massacre if they're operating in China. On a 20, that's a 1 in 20 chance on a d20. It adds 1 level to the USA production level. USA starts at 0 production. When they reach 30, they definitely go to war. if every other turn in the Pacific Theatre, they go up one level. They go up from Japanese massacres, and you also roll for Japanese massacre when Japanese take a city. So that there's a city under there, and they took another city over here, Nanjing. And they also took this, Hangzhou. So I've rolled 3 times for massacres from cities, and that can cause, on a 17 to 20, you get a level 1 increase. So fortunately, none of them did that yet. But because for taking a factory, the US production level also goes up 1. So you can see how this war in China is racking up the USA ire and making them look hard over their shoulder at Japan. Now the next point in the turn is the weather check. It's a D6 roll, and I rolled a 4 there. I mark my weather here on the production chart, so that's a 4. When we do that, we look at, there's 2 charts to do with weather. The first is, where is it, the weather table, which is quite a large chart here, because every month is listed separately, and then different weather zones. So June we are in on a 4, so we're looking here, and on June, so we don't have polar zone here. We've got Arctic clear, temperate zones clear, the Mediterranean's not here, subtropics clear, the North monsoon area is clear, and the South monsoon area is clear. Wow, clear weather everywhere. And I have some homemade counters to mark the weather, because these zigzag sort of pale brown lines delineate the zones. And as you can see, you could potentially have lots of different weather in different zones. Weather going all the way from monsoon, which is like a full-on rain, terrible for moving planes and troops. Blizzard, terrible also likewise, and that then winter weather, whereby in the Arctic area you're going to have lakes and rivers freezing over, mud, rain, and clear weather. So there's sort of just completely clear weather throughout the whole region this month. Super. The next phase is next part of the preparation phase is initiative. Now this is a bit interesting, because you roll 2d6, 1 for each side, the Axis and the Allies, and then somebody can have modifiers to it. Now at the moment the Japanese started with 5 modifiers, and they spent 4, which was 2 separate modifiers to the die to ensure they got initiative. So they only have 1 left. They're going to save that for now. So I'm just going to roll the initiative straight. And that's 4 and 2, 4 to the Japanese. So they have initiative. Now to note is that if you don't get the initiative, you can request for re-roll. And this can only happen once each initiative phase. So the roll is made again. If there's any modifiers on previously, they're still added in now. You might gain initiative again. You might gain initiative on the reroll. If you don't gain initiative on the reroll, a point of bonus goes to your opponent, so they will get a bonus stored up to modify the initiative die. So the Chinese don't actually need initiative desperately at the moment. They're not sort of making any attacks and so forth. So we will leave that as it is. So that is a Japanese initiative. Maybe just mention one point of, sorry, that's out of focus. Sorry. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit here. So I will mention one point about the map, because essentially the Japanese are here with the rising suns. Then these yellow units are Chinese. The sort of front lines more or less down here. But we have partisan divisions here, sort of playing havoc behind the Japanese lines. Now, normally partisans are just abstract number factors that they can, if you have, say, 5 partisans, you can roll on a partisan table, and partisan assault. We'll get to this later, but essentially they might cause some damage to railways, storage depots, and they might take some hits themselves. The Chinese reached something like 35 partisans at one point. Recently, they can spend replacement points to get partisans, and they get 1d6 every turn. And so they created a whole load of partisans and bunched 5 of them each into partisan divisions, and really just playing with the game to see what effect those have. So they actually have 0 defense and attack strength. But see, that's partisan division. That I think is a haystack behind him, or to the side of him. But they can move around. They can cut supplies. So they have zones of control. I think that's true. Anyway, I'll get back to them in the partisan phase, and we have communist partisans here and nationalist partisans here. Sorry, I'll do that again. Communist partisans here, nationalist partisans here. Okay, I'm going to have to watch that focus, aren't I? Now, the next part of the phase of the turn is reorganisation. But now we've entered the active side action segment, so that's the initiative player. So we're now on the Japanese part of the turn. They start with reorganisation. The first thing they would do is flip headquarters. Now, let's get closer so you can see some headquarters. I've got a little gantry thing going here, so excuse the bounce. It'll take me a little while to get it good. But okay, this just so we can have a look. Here is a headquarters. You see the little headquarters motor car. That's Tsushima. And if in the previous turn he had lent any of this central command strength, that's 2 points. 2 as an attack bonus, he would be flipped. He's not flipped. Over here on the Japanese side, Shang, I guess that's Chiang Kai-shek as we know him. Mao is up here. Sorry, off camera. We've got Mao here. But anyway, Chiang, his headquarters here, is on top of a reserve marker. So headquarters can also put units in reserve, which mean essentially the infantry units can move in like a reactive segment in the opposing player's turn, and also in the exploitation segment as though they were tank units. But we'll get more of that later. And I'm not sure, I can't remember now if that flips. No, that doesn't flip them, it's only the bonus. Okay, and then let's also remove marker section, which is something that happens is that if you have units in the field, we don't have any tank units here, but say one of these infantry units, no, I don't think it happens with infantry. With the research, you can upgrade armour, aircraft, subs, etc. So if any of these aircraft, I don't know if you can see any here, if any aircraft had been upgraded, i.e. you had built research and made sort of built up facilities for better aircraft, you could have marked one of those the previous turn, I believe it is, but at this point you take that marker off and upgrade that unit. That's not happening in this game at the moment. So the next bit is supply check. This happens at the beginning and end of the active player's turn. If you're out of supply at this point, you get marked with an empty oil drum. Everybody here is going to be fine because I've been careful moving them. There were Chinese here in the salient that got out of supply. At the end of the turn, they were still out of supply and they took hits, which actually eliminated a few of them. But that's the problem the Chinese have at the beginning here, is that many of their units are very weak. They've lost about 7 or 8 of these 2-2 units. And they don't move very fast as well. So they've started producing stronger units, but they will take some months before they come into effect. 2 of them came into the reinforcements at the beginning of this turn, in fact. So the supply's fine. Now we repair hits on land units. So you see here a 4. That means that the partisans put some hits. It's actually on the port here rather than the land units. so I think I would repair the port in the production phase. I can't quite remember that, but partisans can do what tactical bombing can do. So they can affect things like ports, but they can't affect things like boats. They can damage planes, so that could potentially be hits on planes. Blue hits are on material, red hits are on infantry and tanks. Yeah, so that's generally how it goes. But so what I got there, but you would need an engineer to repair those hits, and the Japanese engineers over here at the end of last term, they put a few more engineers into the production because they want to start repairing these hits that the partisans are creating. There's 2 more hits here, and these hits actually, oh no, there's 4 of them. Yeah, that's right. They're actually on the port there again as well. Okay, so I will be making a few gaps, but you get the basic idea. Repair hits on land units. I should probably read it out of the no, so sorry, no, yeah, that's what it is. Sorry, so I was going about something slightly different there, but land units, so like infantry or tanks, potentially, I guess even headquarters, they might take hits, red hits rather, which would reduce their attack and defense strength down. And at this point, you can spend replacements to repair those hits. Now I brought them all up at the beginning of last term, all up to strength, and there were no battles last term, so they're okay. Next bit is rail movement. Now, every nation has a sort of rail movement limitation. The Japanese can only rail move 1 unit per turn, and that would be over there in Japan, along, I don't know if you can see those 2 along these rail lines here. But they also get a bonus 1 rail movement within China, because you can see obviously they've captured some of the Chinese rail network. But only 1 unit. Nations like Germany can move 7, for example, but movement's a lot more limited here on the Pacific theatre because of the scale that is different from the European theatre of operations. Now, what do I want to do by way of rail movement? I don't think I have any, because I didn't get anyone in position to do it. I'm trying to deal with these partisan divisions at the moment, and so we're having to move troops back behind lines. Now we come to the rebase aircraft phase. I won't be rebasing aircraft because we're not going to be doing that many long distance strikes at the moment. And then we come to the engineers finish installations phase. So that's not going to happen for the Japanese. They haven't started building installations. But for example, there's an engineer under here who's halfway through building a fort, and another one under there as well. So they would finish those forts this phase. Now we go to the naval phase. We start with naval movement. And I'll kind of whiz through this because the Japanese don't need to be doing much naval movement now, and the Chinese have no navy. But basically, I'll just reel off for you what's possible. Essentially, there are these missions that can be done in any order that you decide. Patrol missions, convoy movement, strategic movement, submissions, sea supply, evacuation of units, shore bombardment, naval land combat. Now that would be essentially carrier aircraft, bombing Pearl Harbor, etc. Or I have had the Japanese Navy down here joining in attacks around here with their aircraft. There's also port attacks that can be done, and invasions, amphibious invasions. And then the last naval mission is mine laying or mine sweeping. They can be done in whichever order you like, and certain of them are called active missions. They can be reacted to by the unactive side, the other player can try and intercept some of those missions. We'll get into that in detail later. Then you go to the naval combat phase. You have submarine combat, air-to-air combat, air-to-sea combat, and then surface combat. So you can see that air join in first against each other, then against the sea forces, and then the surface sea forces can fight if they are within range. Now we go to the land movement phase, and we start with engineer activity. And I believe under here I have, and there's a lot of aeroplanes here. There he is, an engineer. So I've got an engineer there, and he's going to start building a fort. So you take one of these handy fort counters, and it's turned upside down, but originally there was no yellow on the back. I put that on myself because there's nothing on the back to distinguish it from the front, except from, you understand the feel of the counter. You can feel which is the back because of the way the sort of edges feel, but I wanted a bit more of a visual aid, and so I modified the counter. So he's started building that factory, and I have to pay for the material cost now. Mustn't lose all those aeroplanes, and you can have 3 infantry units stacking in a hex, and 3 aircraft in every city, which automatically has an airbase. You can also build air bases using your engineers. And I just check, because I think the material cost of a fortress is a fort is 3 material and a fortress 6. I think fortresses have they can fight back. They have guns embedded in them, so 3 material points go off the Japanese resources chart or storage pool. Okay. And there's only one engineer in China at the moment for the Japanese. Next we move to the land movement active side. So this is the all-important phase at this point. I'll zoom out a bit because the action's going to be over a bigger area, obviously. Okay. So forgive me while I think aloud and make ridiculous mistakes in my movement. Maybe, in fact, I'll do this off camera and come back after. Okay, I thought I might as well talk you through some things. Just so yeah, I was a bit. I just took a minute to think. What do the Japanese do now? I'd kind of stalled because they got this bit they wanted, and the rest of China's huge. To conquer it, they have to capture all of it, all its cities. And there's one all the way. I'm covering it up. There's one all the way up there, which is a long way to get when you're coming from China. But I think they're going to carry on doing what they do, divide it into smaller chunks. So now the aim is to cut off a bit up here into Mongolia. The Japanese are engaged in diplomacy to bring the Mongolians over to their side, and also the Burmese. Burma begins here, which will aid them in their fight against China. But essentially, just for the sake of it, this game I'm thinking Japan want all-out conquest of China, so they're going to go all out, just to see how that goes. It doesn't matter if they fail miserably in the war against the US later. We're just playing a game. So, and a game against myself. Anyway, even if it was opposed, it would be interesting just to see what happens when one tries something different. But I have to be careful because we've got all these partisan divisions behind lines, so I have to put units off to one side there. But anyway, that's just telling you what I'm thinking of doing, and then I'll come back after I've done the moves. And I think there's still salient things to say. So I'm thinking about the movement, and for example here, we've got the unit here would like to move here. This is from a rough area, I think that's hills, kind of to another hilly area. But that means he has to move from the zone of control of the units here into another of their zones of control. That means that this unit could provoke what's called a block. Essentially what would happen is that there would be a combat in this hex. All combats happen in hex. So if he moved here, there would be a combat in this hex. And one would place a vector, attack vector, indicating the attack came in this direction. If he moves there and he blocks, then essentially it would be like this. He would go in there and he would move into it. So he would be provoking an attack. The design intent of that is that the zones of control are actually quite valuable in the sense that this unit is thought to project strength and ability even into that hex. So in effect he's in that hex, but only if he really chooses to be. It's quite helpful for the Chinese to provoke attacks even if they don't do very well in them, because they cost JCP points for the attacker. And JCP points are essentially the factor that the game uses to limit the war here. You only get so many a turn, 2 every turn for both sides, once for the communists and once for the nationalists for the Chinese. And you have to spend 1 for every air or ground unit that attacks. You can also gain them by killing forces of the enemy with 3 or greater defense or attack strength points. So all the puny ground forces of the Chinese that were destroyed earlier gained no JCPs for the Japanese, but you also gain them for conquering cities, factories and resources. So the Japanese have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. The Chinese between them have got more than that. But effectively that means that this turn the Japanese could only fight with 8 ground or air units, and if they did, they would only be able to do it with 2 next turn, unless, say, they had conquered a city, which gains them 1 or 2. So you see, you have to conserve one's resources. You might think, duh, so why are you trying to all-out conquer China? Well, Japan can declare war on China at a certain point, in which case it's all-out war, but then that has repercussions in diplomacy in USSR and stuff like that. So yeah, we were talking about this potential block move. Well, I'm going to do it, and we're going to see what the trouble is. The communists are moving up around here. But this is the intent. So the Chinese, they're just going to move 1 unit, a stronger defense one. Interesting thing about these counters is they all have, there's a lot of variability of strength. So an infantry unit like this one has 4 attack, 4 defense. This one's 4 attack but 3 defense. This one's 3 attack, 3 defense. So there's a lot of variability in the counters, which creates interest when trying to decide what to build and also what to move and stuff. It's interesting game. So they've moved there. The Chinese have to decide whether to block. They've only got weak forces there, but it will cost the Japanese a resource, and they do want to slow them down, and they will get a point because they'll be defending in rough terrain, so they're going to do that. They're going to move just one of those fellows there. So we take these off the map and put them on the battle chart and mark that hex with a battle vector, and you note it indicates the direction of the attacker moved into the hex, because combat can go on for as many rounds as the attacker or defender likes. After any round of combat, first the attacker, then the defender can decide to retreat. The attacker will be able to retreat into these 2 hexes, kind of like the 3 rear ones of the battle vector, and the defender can retreat into these 5, I believe. So you get interesting, there could be overlap, And you see, it could kind of create, the attacker could retreat out of there after one round of combat, but they don't necessarily have to go straight back where they came. They could kind of try and sidle around the opponent slowly like that. So that's interesting. Okay, so that I'm going to take the JCP off for that as I mark the attack so I don't forget. So that's one Japanese-Chinese point cost for the Japanese. Now he's staying there. He's going to stay there because of them. I'll think a bit more. Okay, now there's a railway here. It goes. I'm allowing it to go through the cities. I don't know if strictly does, and I'm actually going to move the headquarters here according to rail movement. I think you can do that because it's no zone of control there. Now I should have done that in the previous phase, but I allow myself to do that as a solo player. I'll do it for both sides because I have to think about both sides. There's a lot to think about. So as long as it doesn't affect play. I allow myself those little backtracks because I consider if I was the Japanese player and thinking correctly, this isn't true. If I was the Japanese player and someone else was playing Chinese, I would have not thought of that until this point. So I give both sides an equal advantage in solo plays. But the next thing to say is that this infantry unit can move along the railway, not as rail move, but as though it was like a road or a railway, as though it were clear terrain. However, there is a river there and you don't get any bridge bonuses. So that's 1, 2, and then 3 for the river. He's got 4 movement. You notice headquarters have only got 2 movement. I don't know if you can see that or not. Some infantry have 3, some very weak ones only have 2, some have 4. Partisans have 6. But the thing to say here is that clear terrain doesn't cost 1 movement point, it costs 2 on the Pacific map. Every sort of terrain cost is, in that sense, is doubled. Not the rivers, because a hex side is a hex side, whether it's big or small scale really. Okay.